Hear that?
There we go.
Michael, you might have to unlock the voice part of this.
So how do I do that?
Oh boy. It should be like a little button on the bottom left, a little security shield where you can assign the pieces to it. Right next to participants, it would say it's like this little shield.
No, I don't have anything.
Hmm. Well, that's not good.
Is that to unmute folks?
Yeah.
Well, Rory was able to unmute himself. So can someone else just test to make sure they can be unmuted? Rose, I see your.
Yes.
Yeah, I think
Oh,
we
there
have
you go.
permission.
Great.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. I got super worried here. We're going to be
Thanks, Rose.
three-person conversation.
Okay, awesome.
All right.
Well,
Well, pull up the slides here and we'll get started. Okay.
yeah. So welcome everyone. My name is Michael Berkshire, and I also work for the Department of Planning. I'm an urban planner in the North region, and I've also been working on sustainability for quite a while in my career too. So hopefully this is going to be a really fun chat here. We have just a few slides that we want to go through, and then we also have some polling questions that we like to share with everybody too. So, and we of course want to provide as much time as possible to get through anyone's comments and questions. So, and if anyone's joining by phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand to make sure that we can address your questions or comments. And then also *6, it will either mute or unmute if you want to participate. So if anyone's joining in that way.
And I guess the one other thing I would just add is I know, since we're a smaller group, I think we can be pretty free flowing with the questions, and everyone can just speak up. But if you want to type a question, feel free to type it in the chat and I'll copy it down and we'll make sure we address it. And I'll be taking notes and helping with the presentation as well. So I guess maybe we dive into the first of these.
And it sounds like we have about 35 minutes. So just in terms of how to participate during this breakout session, you can follow the instructions on the top of the screen when we do actually the polling. Of course, you can submit any questions or comments using the chat function. And Rob and I will be watching that to make sure that we can address any comments or questions. And then, of course, feel free to raise your hand. But as Rob said, since we're such a small group, I think we can all just jump in. And please interrupt at any point. We want this to be interactive. I don't want to be a talking head here. So, but we do have some principles that we want to share with everyone in terms of the conversation. We want to be transparent, and we're sharing all the information that the consultants and the team has put together. We want to have inclusion we want to listen to everyone, and we want to embrace any productive tensions and respectful disagreements, and we all want to communicate in good faith. So let's stay as collaborative and let's have as much fun as we can in the next 35 minutes and have a serious conversation. So we want to just start things off and make sure everyone's functions work. Which part of the corridor are you all most familiar with? You can.
So if you go to this poll.ev, and I'll type this in the chat as well for everyone. If you go to that website, you'll be able to click on the map, and that's where we'll handle most of our questions for all of this. And so it'll be a nice resource, and then we can collect the data and use it as we move forward.
And everything should come up real time, right, Rob?
That's the plan. Technology can be fickle, but it worked earlier today.
We're having a little trouble trying to figure out where to click.
Okay.
It's not working if you just click on the map.
So you actually need to pull it up on your laptop or your phone.
Yeah, on your laptop. So if you go to that.
Okay, we're working on it.
Okay, great.
And
this
the
is what
screen
Oh,
The screen for someone as a guest, it looks like we're waiting for the presentation to begin, so we don't see the map yet.
Really?
Retype that. www.
So I see it. No one else is seeing the map?
Oh, it should be up now.
Okay, great.
Sorry about that. This is the first time I've used the map personally. So, oh, there we go.
Okay, we have one response, it looks like.
It's not, I'm sorry, it's not gonna be as fun with only 8 people. So hopefully we get someone here up by Peterson and we can really have it covered here.
Looks like we have a couple Lincoln Square folks here.
Lincoln Square, yeah.
Okay. So has everybody been able to, oh, there we go. There's a new one, Foster. So we got a nice representation here, it looks like. And it looks like we have someone in Rogers Park.
Okay,
Okay.
that's good. We got good coverage.
Mm.
Just click in it. See if there's a, I think if you just click in it, click like in here, just click, I am, oh. it's not.
So one of the things that we wanted to talk about, I guess, is, what is the most, and this is more of a discussion question, so we can just have an open discussion. Like, what is the most pressing issue regarding resilience and sustainability along the corridor? And I'm sorry, Michael, I think I just stepped all over your question.
And Rob, no, that's fine. Rob, this is kind of open-ended. So
Yeah.
will like thought clouds come up when they.
No, I think we're just gonna take notes on this one for this opportunity.
Rory, feel free to jump in.
Okay, yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's interesting to hear the 3 themes of land use and of transportation and sustainability, because really they just interconnect so tightly. I think definitely resilience and sustainability sort of trickles down from carbon usage and our kind of carbon habits around the Western corridor, but they certainly don't end there, because it then has knock-on effects to things like air quality, or to things like public health, or to things like mobility and transit. So I definitely think, as sort of a younger person on this call and interested in kind of our carbon future, I definitely think it sort of begins with our emissions portfolio when it comes to thinking about these big long chunks of section of our city, and the Western Corridor is a great example of that. In particular, transportation, which I know is a different breakout group, but how we shift away from carbon emitting modes of transportation into ones that not only are better for the planet as a whole, but are better for the immediate environment, whether that's electric buses, the buses that are becoming electrified thanks to the CTA, or pedestrian and bicycle transportation, all of which have like networked different cascading trade-offs and knock-on effects there.
Yes, absolutely. Anyone else? Anything we missed as that you think is particularly pressing?
Well, I don't know if this falls into this category, but as far as like sustainability goes, I feel like no matter what happens in our area, which is basically Pratt and Western, it's about keeping the maintenance up of whatever happens. Trees, a lot of trees in our area desperately need pruning. We've got a lot of dead wood. that kind of thing, if it's not kept up, it becomes like a real problem every time there's a storm or
Right.
whatever. And to me, that's like I think every stoplight should have a left turn arrow and those kind of things that seem kind of simple, but I think would make a big difference in how traffic flow is and whatever. I mean, that's kind of my bottom line is like, what happens after, you know, do you just do it and then we
Right.
have to live with it, or is it?
No.
Yeah.
It's a very important point. And am I speaking to Rose or Monica?
Oh, this is Monica.
Okay, Monica. No, that's a really good point because, you know, some of the examples that Rob showed during the presentation were, you know, like new bioswales along the corridor or new landscape bump outs or any kind of landscape that you construct, and it has to be maintained.
Right.
Because if the drains get clogged, you know, they're not going to drain the stormwater properly. And we also have to be very careful about, for instance, if we are going to plant new trees, to make sure there's enough soil for the tree to actually survive. What we found is the average parkway tree in Chicago only lives to be 10 to 12 years old because there's not enough soil. So we have set some standards for the amount of cubic feet of soil that needs to be put per tree in order for them to be able to grow to you know, an age where they're actually doing their job and providing the shade. And they're one of the best methods of stormwater management too. So if we could just add more trees that are healthy and that actually live a long life, that could do a lot for not only lowering the temperatures along Western Avenue, but also managing stormwater and keeping it out of our, you know, overburdened combined sewer system. So that's a really good point, Monica.
Yeah, and maybe one more thing to add to that. One of the things that I neglected to say was we're also looking at, and I think the city's been looking at this too, the different foresters, is obviously climate change will impact the Chicago region, right? And you hear a lot, even farmers are talking about this, right? The USDA hardiness zones, what plants can grow in what environment. And so what trees we would plant is going to be changing over the next 50 years. You know, we're not going to have the same amount of honey locust or maybe swamp white oaks that you might normally see along a street tree corridor. You might have a different type of tree that might be found maybe further down in southern Illinois. And so staying ahead of that so we can really prolong the life of these trees is going to be something that we're going to be encouraging in this plan, I think, citywide.
And especially, I don't know how easily you can pull this up, Rob, but he showed a map where there is less canopy cover or actually more impermeability on the site, meaning less porosity, which typically adds to higher temperatures as well. So we can focus, you know, because the city has limited funds, right? We'd all love to spend a lot of money and solve all the problems, but because we have to be very strategic, we can focus, you know, any tree planting in these areas where we're experiencing the highest temperatures along the corridor, and also where we need to increase, you know, the amount of landscape space. So, yeah,
that's a good point.
And also where they can have the most impact to actually improve the pedestrian and experience along the corridor. So we should focus trees on where people are waiting for buses, right? Who wants to stand out in the sun to wait for a bus? Or if we have concentrations of, you know, these hubs of commercial activity, you know, we can have more trees there so people can actually want to, if they buy something at a restaurant, they can sit outside and enjoy their meal under a tree. So we can be a little bit more strategic on where we make those investments. And also where we might have partners in terms of the chambers and community groups that can help with the maintenance of any new landscape areas that we have.
Right. I work at the Botanic Garden, and I mean, we've had always such a huge volunteer presence that helps us. And I've always thought it's kind of a shame that the city doesn't have like a really healthy volunteer thing, because maybe, you know, you don't want them out there with, you know, big saws and things like that, but they can certainly do, inventory of, branches and things like that, and learn how to prune properly, and maybe, just go out in little groups and things like that.
Yep. And make sure that all the drains aren't clogged so that the streets aren't flooding and all that kind of stuff. So, yep.
Yeah.
Okay. What's our next question, Rob?
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Anyone else has other comments, or otherwise we'll move on to the next.
Okay.
Yeah, so this next slide is, so these are options on ways that we could help lower the temperatures along Lincoln or along Western Avenue. And, not only does it help just lower temperatures so that people, don't have to use their air conditioning as much and, lower the emissions because of that, but it's also a very important health issue that any day the temperature is above 70 degrees, all the particulates in the air, so all the dust and other stuff in the air, that interacts with that heat, and that provides creates ground level ozone, which really impacts people with upper respiratory, so with asthma and other allergies. So it's a really important health issue as well. But these are some of the options that we could look at to help, lower temperatures along the corridor. So I think this is the second polling question where you can choose which ones you would like to see along Western Avenue.
And I'll just add a little caveat. They all kind of do a little double duty to a degree. Like, right, the permeable paver image is also very reflective, right? It's a lighter color pavement, so it's not going to be as warm. Obviously the planting extension.
And
obviously the planting extensions at the curbs, shortened crosswalks and things like that. So they all kind of work together. So I'll go to the next slide so y'all can.
So this is where we can actually vote.
Okay.
So sorry, the photos are a little smaller, but you can choose A, B, C, or D. Or can you vote for more than one, Rob?
Can Rose vote for one and I can vote for one?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You bet. Yeah, we want everybody to vote.
Isn't this like where we make a horrible Chicago joke that everyone about voting?
Vote often and vote.
But early, vote often.
Early, yeah.
I'm not sure we've successfully voted.
And it's interesting because C can also be a little bit of a traffic calming strategy as well.
Oh, we're in trouble again. You can't just click on that?
Yeah, and I think that's a great sign, is the stuff that is able to perform. It's not just a singular intervention doing a singular function, but that, hey, here's something that is lowering the temperature. Here's something that is, has green space and is cleaning the air. And here's something that is minimizing the crosswalk to crosswalk distance so that pedestrians have a safer journey.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I really like the youth council video because they said, things that they'd like to see is a little bit more color. Well, adding vegetation is one of the best ways to add a little bit of color to the corridor, right? So.
There are certainly a lot of very blah sections of Western.
Yes. Okay. Looks like that bump out that could also accept stormwater and increase some landscaped area is our #1 choice.
Great. Well,
but kind of an even selection here.
Great.
Okay.
Can I make a comment about that?
Please.
Those are great, the islands and the other ones, but if you live right here on Western, people are speeding like crazy. They are racing. And to me, somebody's going to end up in there or knock it off. I think, and I'm not saying it shouldn't be done or shouldn't be considered. I think that there just needs to be maybe a concerted police effort to cut down on that. It's not good. It's
right.
Scary.
Yeah.
And it just seems like something like that, at 11 at night, people racing.
Disaster. Yep. And to to your earlier point, Monica, D, the permeable pavers,
Yeah,
that's going to help lower temperatures and help manage stormwater, but it also is very low maintenance, right?
right.
So there might be particular points in the corridor where that would be the better selection,
Right.
just because there's maybe less space to add more vegetation, or there's just a different kind of use there where that would be more appropriate than adding
Right.
like a landscape median.
Yeah.
I think those permeable pavers in particular, when I think about the corridor and specific locations on the corridor, there's the Western station at Western and Leland that is, I know it's sort of out of the scope of this particular project, and that the planning department is taking kind of a 35,000 foot level to a 5 mile stretch. But the Lincoln Square, the Chamber of Commerce, or whichever it is, along with the aldermen, are working on that particular project, which is of course an incredibly significant transit hub in its own right. There's a lot of spalling concrete right there. There's a divvy rack with like different concrete hills that they have to kind of contend with. That to me is an excellent candidate for something like permeable paving, which is currently just impermeable aggregate, but absolutely something that that a better road surface would help the farmers market that's there, would allow the farmers market to be more parts of the season because they're not flooded out. There's definitely a lot of that's one example. There are many good candidates of spots along this 5 mile corridor for this permeable paving.
No, that's a really good point, because that would provide for the multiple uses of that particular site, right?
I'll just add one more thing. We show a lot of summer images, and this might be, of course, we're in summer, we're thinking summer, but the permeable pavements and these other solutions, right, are also really important when it comes to salt, right? We love our salt in Chicago and on sidewalks and roads, but salt doesn't really do a whole lot of good for water quality, whether that's in the river or the lake or ultimately the plants. And so it's good to get that back into the groundwater before it enters the sewer system, or maybe gets discharged to the river, and ultimately cause a greater problem downstream. So.
Yep. Okay. We're kind of running out of time, Rob. So
I'm hurrying. Sorry, it's just being a little tricky on the next one. So, all right, this next one here.
I think we could skip this one because I think everyone would agree we need to address stormwater, right?
Right. Yes.
Anyone?
And do so systemically, right?
Yeah.
Do so not piecemeal.
Right. So here's some examples of ways that we could better address stormwater. And this is our next polling question. What are the preferences for what would you all like to see along Western in terms of providing this better stormwater management?
And we should be able to vote. So we'll try again. But it's not clear.
And do we have a slide where they can choose?
Yep.
Okay. There you go.
Quick shameless plug, that's the green roof on the American Society of Landscape Architects headquarters in Washington, D.C. So if anyone's interested.
I worked for Gensler. I think that's a Gensler project. I worked for Gensler.
Probably is.
Oh,
Yeah.
great.
It's a great roof. But it's a perfect scale, right, for like Western, right? Like there's so many kind of historic 3 to 4 story buildings. How great would it be to have a green roof intervention on an existing building without having to wait for new buildings to come along?
Okay. Looks like green roofs were very popular, along with permeable pavers, street trees, and planted medians. Great. These are excellent choices.
We are registered. We can see that, so just to maybe.
Okay. This might be one of our last questions. Are we missing anything in terms of big ticket items that we should be considering to improve the resilience or sustainability of the corridor?
It doesn't seem like anything's missing. It seems pretty in depth. I guess just curious, in terms of a question, you mentioned money is limited. How do you kind of get all of this done? I thought those little towers were really compelling with the solar and wind. But how much do those cost versus a tree? How do you kind of make that all work?
Right. And part of this study will be Rob and his team will be looking at different methods for paying for all this. So, because, a lot of the corridor, well, the section of corridor that we're looking at right now does have their tax improvement areas, so TIF areas, but some of them are going to be expiring soon. So we have to look at alternative methods on how we're going to be able to pay for those. But that's where, we want to be really strategic about where some of these strategies go. And our next set of focus group meetings is going to be more geographically based. So we're really going to dive into particular areas along the corridor, and you all can choose what area you want to focus in, so we can really kind of help pinpoint where some of these things could be implemented. Right, Rob?
Yes, and I think part of that too is, obviously we'll be showing the improvements that we're evaluating to you guys and looking for feedback on where and how. But part of the planning process, right, is to kind of figure out where do we get our best bang for our buck on these kind of things. And that's not just from like visuals and how much it costs, but like performance-based metrics too, right? Like, well, we can take up all this amount of stormwater if we do this, or if we do this for $10 cheaper, we can take care of urban heat island and do these 3 other things and add some trees, and maybe that's the better way to go. And then that kind of works in with short-term and long-term, right? Because we can't just sit around and wait another 10 years and we finally got some funding and we'll do a project. I think it's important. This is me speaking, not Michael, the city, but I think it's important to get a project going sooner than later to keep the momentum going, because I think we're having such a good planning process with the community that we want to see that continue into the next thing. So,
but no, Rob brings up a good point. So the objectives of this plan is to come up with short-term solutions and strategies, as well as still have a vision for the long term for the corridor as well. So we don't want to, there's going to be all kinds of hopefully new technologies that will help us address these issues, but we don't want to lose focus on the long-term view too. But as Rory said earlier, there's with the other categories of things that we're talking about tonight, where can we, where are the best places to put housing so that people have opportunities for mass transit, so they don't rely on personal vehicles, and they can walk to a restaurant or walk to their neighborhood shop to do most of their day-to-day, shopping. So all of these are very important sustainability goals. They're not silos that we can't look at together. And we need to look at strategies that also provide multiple benefits, not just, we don't want to address single issues. We want to look at things that provide a lot of benefits. So, and I didn't know we had a timer. We still have 9 minutes left.
Yeah.
Rob, so we can keep going.
I think
I just want to point out.
I think the technology point is kind of well taken, and there's a lot of energy and enthusiasm and hype around like technology that we all hear is going to be 5 years down the line, or but there are also solutions that we know work well today and that do have very good return on investment. And we've said it a lot today. It's like a simple tree, it's simple, but it's complicated. I mean, you have to think about cubic yards of soil, certainly, but sticking with the stuff that we know works rather than banking on a sort of Deus Ex Machina style technology is where you really start leading into that economic viability. And that goes to Monica's point earlier, right? Like, it's not just about a project that works once, but how are you thinking about good economic stewardship over the life cycle of this investment? So I commend the project team for thinking in terms of the longer term and not just proposing splashy projects that'll get done quick for a quick win. In that regard, then, with the economic viability and then the longer term vision, one thing that strikes me as missing, to get back to the discussion question on the screen here, is a foregrounding of bus rapid transit. I know your colleague Stacy indicated that, yes, you've left it open-ended for the possibility of bus rapid transit. I'm curious as to why this, and not that you're at the end of the process, you're in the middle of the process, why bus rapid transit isn't foregrounded more, given that it for me gets as close to a silver bullet across all three of your priority zones as any singular tactic, with the caveat that, you've got to think holistically. But, if Western has like, I think 1/8 of a mile of bus only lane, and it's outside of the study area, outside of this corridor, why? I know that bus lanes can be controversial and car drivers like their car driver space, and that when it comes to the roads, like, it really does become a game of feet and inches. And so the details become very important. But I'm curious as to why the project team has been less than full-throated in their support for bus rapid transit and a bus only lane.
And Rob, maybe you can answer that more. But Rory, please put that in the chat or follow up with a question so that we will address that. I'm not an expert on that tonight, but
if you need it in writing for me to yell at you about buses, I promise I will do that.
Okay.
I like that.
But I don't know if you have anything to add, Rob.
I guess I'll just add, I think one of the things I do know for sure that the planning team is working on is trying to figure out if it's not, they have looked at, I think, opportunities for bus rapid transit, but also looking at other opportunities as well that could be a little maybe more easily implementable, right, in the short term. Again, this is that kind of that short term, long term thing. And there's, I know there's a lot of studies going on, whether it was related to, I believe, signal prioritization, or the bus bulbs to increase, these areas for loading capacity. I think there's other technology items that CTA is looking at. Whether or not it comes all at once or it's a series of incremental changes, I think is something that still needs to be evaluated. But you're totally right, Rory. It's a game of inches on the street, and in trying to find that happy medium where we can accommodate the deliveries and some of the freight piece that goes on Western, but then accommodating the daily traffic and the business uses. It's tricky. But no, please put that in email. Transportation planning is not my specialty. That's Stacy's game, but I know enough to be dangerous when I talk about it.
But it's coming up a lot, and this is good because that might be one of the main recommendations coming out of this study.
Yeah.
Great, and that's so Western Ave at cityofchicago.org is the email address. I think I have it somewhere in my contacts, but
it should come up at the end of this presentation. But yes.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm copying the notes out of the chat too, so don't worry about that. You had on your Vision Zero too. Did you want to say anything about that?
Sure. I mean, and I don't mean to take this conversation hostage and like push us into the mobility group, but I think to Monica's point, drivers do act a little loco on this stretch of Western, and that part of that psychological, right? Like, it's this big, wide, clear, straight shot street that encourages you to drive 5, 10, even 20 miles above the posted speed limit. And so I'm heartened to hear that the project team, based on what I heard earlier tonight, is thinking about, okay, how do we not try and shoehorn safe cycling onto Western, and instead encourage bikes to use the really great north-south connections, be it on Damon, be it along the Riverwalk, the North Branch Channel. That to me seems like the right answer, rather than trying to make Western into something it's not. But with aggravated drivers empowered on a big wide street to be driving pretty fast, I mean, that has collision written all over it for pedestrians and for cyclists. And so if we can have a little bit of a mode shift away from cars onto buses, and acknowledge that buses as commercial drivers have a lower incidence of pedestrian and cyclist collision than than your median car. Not zero, obviously, but so when it comes to Vision Zero, which is a plan that many North American cities have adopted to bring the number of road deaths to zero, I think this is another opportunity to be thinking holistically and to think across 6 or 7 or 8 different silos and say, okay, well, how can we really be thinking about the longevity of this Western corridor to achieve all kinds of good benefits, ultimately for the humans that live and work and play along this corridor.
Yes.
I just want to bring up, Brett posted in the chat here, but just this idea about volunteerism, working off of Monica's point earlier, I think that's a really great idea, and I think we need to explore that a little bit more about how we can encourage that. It might not be in the median just because of traffic safety, but I think there are opportunities along the corridor, at least on the sidewalk or in adjacent areas, or something like that. I think Mike would agree to that.
Yes.
We got a minute and a half left. Michael, is there any closing thoughts, or is anyone have any closing statements that they want to get out before we leave?
Or do we have any more questions?
Yeah.
To cover? Sorry. But I'd like to just open it up to anyone. If you have any last minute thoughts. Don't be shy.
Is there a email list for these meetings? Because this is great, but I heard about it from my alderperson. So just curious if it's something you can hear about, independently.
Yes. Go ahead, Rob.
There is an email list. It's here. I'm going to copy and paste it in the chat real quick. You'll see it on the last slide of the presentation as well. This is where you sign up for that. Sorry, it's one of those tiny URLs. It doesn't make any sense. But you can go there and sign up for email updates, or you can go visit the Western Avenue project website, which is right here as well.
Yeah. Brett, either one of those methods would, but you will be added to the list to get all future notifications of upcoming meetings as well by participating tonight. And
if you have additional questions or comments, please email them here.
And I just want to close by saying we really, really appreciate your time tonight. And please stay tuned and stay with us and join us on the next set of focus groups. We're going to have a really robust and fun discussion during those. And those are probably going to happen, I don't know, later in August or early September.
Thank you for asking for our input.
No, thank you. Right on time.
Yeah, how about that? Almost like we planned it. All right, see y'all.
Thank you.